Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the NFL Pre-Lock Show here on Rotogrinders. Breaking down some football for you on a Sunday afternoon, getting ready for the second day of the divisional playoffs. I am Justin Van Zuden, aka STL Cardinals 84, and we had a couple of interesting games yesterday. Both of the road teams pulling off upset victories in some lower scoring football, but at least more competitive games than what we saw last week. So hopefully that continues today. Some more exciting matchups, I guess, on paper, and we will break those down here. We got about a half an hour until kickoff of the first game. So we've got Dan Gaspar, aka Mr. Tuttle, alongside. Tuttle, what's going on today?
Not much. We talked a little pre-show, and I'm a Wisconsin guy, so a little bit of a Packers fan, but not like a huge Packers fan. Still a little disappointed they lost, but I was more tilting I had Alan Lazard on my main tournament team. I was more tilting that than the Packers lost last night. Rodgers only had eyes for Devontae, and so to make matters worse, I had the tilt this morning. I had gotten over it last night. Log on to Twitter this morning. I don't know if you guys saw, there was that screenshot or the play where he chucked it up to Devontae, double coverage towards the end of the game. There's that play going around on Twitter, and it's just Lazard wide open over the middle of the field, probably had like a 40-50 yard gain, easy gain in front of him. So the tilt promptly started right back up this morning after I had just gotten over it last night.
It was a disaster of a special teams performance by the Packers, and only fitting, and not sure if you saw this as well, but they only had 10 players on the field for the final field goal. And so I saw somebody post, well, what's the big deal? What are the odds of a kick getting blocked? Apparently forgetting that the Packers had 2 kicks blocked in the very game, but 18 catches for Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, 2 catches and 6 yards for everybody else combined in the Packers offense. So it was special teams, and then a little too one-dimensional last night, cost the Packers the game. We've got Keith Eister, Iceman, alongside as well. Keith, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm a Bears fan, so I was not disappointed to see the Packers lose. Nice to see a couple underdogs pull it out yesterday. I think got a good shot to see at least one underdog here today, but should be a couple of exciting games. Good offenses all around, decent defenses, so lots to talk about.
I saw a really interesting thread going around Twitter this morning. So you've got the Bengals and the 49ers, who, no matter who wins today, I think most people will consider the Bengals and the 49ers the underdogs in the championship games. But both of those teams would only have to win 2 more games to win the Super Bowl, whereas the teams playing today still have to win 3. So if you were to place a bet right now, this very moment, before today's games, to where knowing that today's teams still have to win 3 games, who's your pick to win the Super Bowl? So I'll ask both of you this. If you had to bet one team right now, knowing the circumstances, Keith, who's your pick?
Definitely an edge knowing that those 2 teams are already in. But I do think the stronger teams are playing today. So I'm still leaning with a team today, even though you got to get that 3rd game.
You got to give me a team, though.
Buffalo would be the team I'm giving you.
All right. Tuttle, who you got?
Yeah, he took mine. It's still Buffalo for me. So I would basically take the winner. I think it's going to be the winner of KC Buffalo, and I would just take the team with the longer odds.
I think, so right now, as I look at it on DraftKings, Buffalo's plus 350, the Chiefs are plus 370. So they're basically around the same. But it was really interesting because you think, the teams that won yesterday have a bit of an edge, but the Bengals still have the longest odds at plus 750. I don't think that's a terrible bet at plus 750 with them only having to win 2 more games, but they will be pretty substantial underdogs, most likely, no matter who they're playing next week, unless, Mahomes gets injured and the Chiefs still win or something like that. But you can get any team you want at like plus 350 or better odds right now. So interesting.
It does look like the Bills has kind of moved, and I didn't even notice this. The game line is that kind of moved in the Bills' direction, and that's obviously impacted the Super Bowl odds too. Because I think last I looked, it was like plus 400 for the Bills. So they're kind of trending towards being, I guess, the popular team now.
Yeah, it lands down to a point for today's game in a few spots. So that's what we got for the nightcap tonight. We've got the Chiefs and Bills. Chiefs favored by a point or 2, depending on where you look, but you got a 50-plus total in that game. That game could outscore both games from yesterday combined, depending on how the offenses do there. And we've got the Rams and the Bucks as the early game with Tampa Bay, obviously ravaged by injury a little bit. I think that could be an interesting game this afternoon, but it's a cross-country trip for the Rams after a Monday night game at home against the Cardinals on a short week since they didn't play till Monday. So tough spot for the Rams, but they do seem to be getting some betting momentum as well. So we could see upsets again today. Wouldn't surprise me if any of the road teams won today as well. Let's go ahead and dig into it. In DFS, we've got obviously 2 games on the main slate here. We've got some big GPPs out there. I've got FanDuel up on my screen right now, but I can flip to DraftKings as needed too. And we can.
Did STL just go?
I think we might have lost Justin. Yeah.
That's too bad. I mean, we'll continue on. We don't have the screen share, but I believe we were just going to get started with the games, and we're going to kind of go one by one. So we'll Keith and I will do that until we get Justin back.
Am I back?
Oh, there you go.
Internet weaseled out for a second, but all right. I don't know where I was, but we were blathering on about Super Bowl odds and all that, but we could dig into the DFS slate today. Producer Eli can throw in a chat and let me know if my screen share came back as well. If not, we can fix that. But let's talk quarterback today. I think most of the ownership is going to go into the later game, but Allen, Mahomes, Brady, and Stafford, obviously 4 quality quarterbacks today. Tuttle, who are you looking at QB this afternoon?
I mean, it's Allen for me. I'm not going to disagree with projections. I think he's got the best combination of rushing upside and kind of ceiling on the slate. And I do think Mahomes would be second. I don't think Stafford's all that bad of a play. I actually prefer Stafford over Brady. That might feel a little hot takey, a little weird. But the Bucs defense is a pass funnel. We've talked about it endlessly throughout the season, much more stingy against the run. Fully expect the Rams to just throw the ball more often. And if you look at the props of all the quarterbacks of those 3, they're all very, very similar. And why I would side with Allen is because he has the higher rushing upside. But it's just from like a passing perspective, I think they're all pretty like it could go either way on this slate between those 3 guys, and even Brady too. Brady's kind of right in the mix as well. But if you're not going chalky with that late game, then it's Stafford for me. And I do like that you can pair him with some lower owned stacking partners as well.
Yeah, I like Stafford as well. I think kind of surprised that our ownership on him is so low. Obviously, the other 3 quarterbacks have the pedigree, the experience, what have you. And Stafford didn't have to throw that much last week because they got ahead by so much. So I don't think we can put a whole lot of stock into his numbers from last week because they got way ahead. So Keith, you in alignment there at quarterback?
Yeah, completely in alignment. Allen, the top overall play. Stafford, he's the cheapest of the bunch too, so that can help you out a little bit. And then just the matchup with Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has been really good against the run. We expect the Rams to throw it quite a bit, especially if they're in a trailing game script. So if you're getting Stafford at the lowest ownership of the group, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, we've got Stafford's ownership at 9% on DraftKings. We've got it at 13% on FanDuel. So I will definitely be overweight on that in my final lineups as well. And you can pair him with some of his receivers too. So we're all pretty much in agreement. You'll see this throughout the games, but I am lower than most on the Kansas City offense with the passing game. I mean, Mahomes is expensive, Hill's expensive, Kelsey's expensive, and that Buffalo pass defense has been arguably the best in the league all year. So some of that's attributable to who they've played, and their division doesn't have a lot of elite pass offenses, but it's still a really strong pass defense. So I like leaning a little away from the Kansas City passing game and the spots where they're expensive and leaning towards Buffalo a little bit in that game. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about running back here. It's a really thin running back slate, and obviously we've only got 2 games. So you're going to see, and we don't know what Kansas City is going to do. So the starters for the other 3 teams, Singletary, Fournette, Cam Akers, that's going to be your chalk. Try to figure out what Kansas City is going to do. Maybe that's the GPP play, but Keith, I'll let you tackle this position first. say if you're doing a cash game, that Singletary, Fournette, Akers trio, or is there a couple that you like best out of that group?
Yeah, running back is really difficult on this short slate. Singletary has played really, really well, but he has also run extremely hot with touchdown variance. I think 5 touchdowns over his last 3 weeks. I don't know that continues. I wouldn't expect it to. I mean, he's not going to score twice every single week. So I think there's some regression coming there for Singletary. Fournette would be my favorite if I had to pick one of them. Mentioned the Bucs tough run defense. Akers did show he was very capable in the passing game last week. So I don't mind him, but I think Fournette would be the one if I had to pick one out of the trio. The Kansas City situation is the most interesting for tournaments for me. We saw Jerick McKinnon just explode last week, over 100 receiving yards, looked really good on the ground as well. Just 4,800. We currently have him projected pretty low owned, coming in 4th overall right now. I don't know if that's the case just because he looked so good last week. CEH coming back obviously is going to cut into his workload a little bit. So be curious to how you guys feel about McKinnon's ownership. His price tags, particularly on DraftKings, is extremely appealing, and he's a guy that makes a lot of sense for me.
Go ahead, Tuttle. What do you think about that Chiefs situation?
Yeah, I think so. The thing with ownership projections is they're largely driven by just our actual projections. And then you have to kind of take nuances into account and manually adjust if you think something's off. So in regards to that McKinnon situation, he's not projecting well because we have CEH in there and projected for at least a decent enough workload. I'm kind of with Keith. I think ownership on McKinnon will be fairly high on this slate. And even on the 4 game as well, just because the price points, it makes it so much sense, right? That he continues to see work. I think at the bare minimum, you'll see him as a pass catching back. And then that could be kind of forced into game flow dependent. If they get to a lead, we might not see as much as McKinnon. If they're playing from behind, I think we will see a lot of him. So I would guess I would take that into consideration when making builds. But again, if we think McKinnon's going to be higher owned, like Keith and I do, that means CEH is going to be real low owned. And I do think that's probably going to be true as well. So it'll be interesting to see. I do prefer McKinnon over CEH, but I think there's plenty of reasons to play CEH in tournaments, especially if you're waiting if you have more exposure to that Rams-Bucs game and are kind of playing for the lower scoring late game, which will be extremely unique. But if you're going that route again, then I think it makes sense to load up on CEH and kind of hopes that he can grind the game away a little bit, which I do think is a possibility. We saw this Buffalo team get beat up on the ground before, so I think that's within the range of outcomes. It's not something I'm putting a lot of faith into myself or investing into a lot myself, but I do think it's a reasonable chance of happening.
Yeah, the game flow in that one I think is going to be, dependent on how those running backs end up getting used, and certainly if they're behind, we know that McKinnon has a history of being involved in the passing game, and given his performance last week, he's certainly earned that role. And Edwards-Helaire, has been a perpetual disappointment in DFS, but he's also going to carry lower ownership if he happens to run good with, maybe he gets a touchdown. Maybe the Chiefs play with the lead. I certainly don't mind him in those kinds of builds. And, you can run him back with the obvious weapons in the Buffalo passing game too, to get yourself some game flow, upside if that game goes according to that script. So that's most of what we have for running backs. I mean, do any of you have any interest in GPPs and like Sonny Michel, or perhaps Gio Bernard gets some passing game work again if Tampa falls behind? Like, Tuttle, is there anybody else you don't mind taking a chance on for some tournaments?
Yeah, Gio would be the other guy I think worth consideration for tournaments. I mean, Fournette's going to be extremely, extremely chalky coming off injury. It's a soft tissue injury too, which I hate. Those always have more risks of re-injury, especially if they're rushing back, which kind of seems to be the case. Practice reports throughout the week weren't the greatest on Fournette in terms of, getting up to full speed, that sort of thing. They did say that would be a condition of him returning, but you just never know if he's being rushed back, that sort of thing. So, I mean, again, it's not something I'm heavily invested in personally, but it's football. We saw it last week with the Kansas City situation and Darrell Williams' injury last week. This Fournette injury could be a lot different than what the masses are predicting. And if that's the case, then Bernard has a lot of value for sure, because I do think they'll be using him as a pass catcher as is. And if that game gets a little bit out of control, like I really think that game will have a lot of just dump offs. And we saw that the first time these two teams met, Tampa Bay and St. Louis. Gio actually had a pretty sizable role in that game. I do think it will be a lot of kind of dump offs to the tight ends, a lot of dump offs to the running backs. So Gio, I think, is in play for sure for tournaments.
It's the first time I've heard someone say St. Louis in error on a football show in a while. As a Cardinals fan, we haven't had a football team around for a few years.
Yeah, how long is that? I don't even know.
It's been like 4 or 5 years, I think.
Wow.
They got the big settlement this year, though, for all the shenanigans that basically the ownership, basically did it behind the fans' backs and everybody's backs. And so St. Louis got some pretty good money out of that. But I still mess up Oakland at times, but that's still a little more common.
Yeah, I don't know. That one, I don't know. That was that one was down deep because I didn't even realize it.
I probably wouldn't have caught it if not for my St. Louis fandom. But anyway, that stuck with me. Now I lost my train of thought. Keith, any other interest in any other running backs for you? And then we're going to grab a couple questions from the chat here.
Nothing much really to add. No interest in Michelle because I think they definitely prefer Akers in the passing game. Not looking to target him at all. Agree with Tuttle's thoughts on Bernard and the Fournette situation. Darrell Williams, if you want to get really weird and a very deep GPP. I mean, we've seen him have a goal line role in the past. He's really cheap. So just a very large field flyer on him, maybe.
All right. And let's kind of do this in conjunction. So we'll come back to receiver, but I want to talk tight end because C. Goddard has a question in the chat about using Knox with Allen and then also using Kelsey in the same lineup. So this is a slate where all 4 teams, I've got the DraftKings, I've got the Saturday games in there on the screen share, but all 4 teams, the Rams, the Bucks, the Bills, and the Chiefs all have quality tight ends, with Kelsey and Gronk being the highest of the group, and then Knox and Higbee being the cheaper of the group. So, Keith, I'll stick with you. Do you have any interest in using the old double tight end lineup today?
I do, yeah. In tournaments, it's not generally something I like to do on a main slate. Even the 4-game slate, it was a little more difficult. But on 2 games with 4 talented tight ends, I definitely think it's possible that we see a couple of these guys outscore a bunch of wide receivers. So, yeah, I think that's a very viable build.
Yeah, I don't mind it as well. Even the 2 in the same game, but Higbee's cheap. We saw he's 4K on DraftKings. He's pretty cheap on FanDuel as well. We saw him have a couple big games at the end of the regular season. We know Gronk in the playoffs and Tampa's pretty thin on receivers. So, Tuttle, you like the 2 tight end build as well?
Yeah, I think I would be less likely to do as crazy as it sounds, I'd be less likely to do like the Gronk and Kelsey builds, because they're like, if you're just comparing price wise who they match up with in terms of what you're foregoing or the opportunity cost at receiver, like Tyreek Hill's really cheap, Stephon Diggs is really cheap, Mike Evans is really cheap. So if I'm doing 2 tight end, it's more so to play one of the higher priced tight ends and then one of the lower priced options. I think you can pretty reasonably argue that like Dawson Knox or Tyler Higbee are better than or equivalent to the other options in their price range, whereas I still side with the receivers at the high end.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Higbee's 4K on DraftKings, Knox is 4,900 on FanDuel. Higbee's 5,400, Knox is 6,500. Knox maybe a little less appealing on FanDuel in general for most, but that's going to keep the ownership down. So if you're using him with Allen and GPPs, I certainly don't mind that. And then that double tight end build will probably be a little more common today, but it's still not going to be, the majority of lineups or anything like that. So, all right, we've got 9 minutes here until lock. Feel free to drop some questions in and we'll talk some wide receivers. D-Dot has a question as well. Tuttle, I'll give you this one first. We've got Tyreek Hill and Gronk, or Cup and Higbee in a FanDuel single entry.
That one's really tough for me. I think Tyreek and Gronk, but I obviously love Cup.
Yeah, so I mean, I end up kind of leaning towards those builds as well, but then I find that almost unintentionally, I end up being a lot lower on Cup simply because his price is higher than all the other receivers. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily want to be underweight on Cup, but that's just kind of how it works out. So, Keith, you got a take on that?
The Tyreek situation is really difficult. He has kind of disappeared on us the last few weeks here. So, yeah, I think I'd be on the other side of that as well.
Yeah, the heel injury was certainly an issue the last week of the regular season. And again, I kind of mentioned earlier that I'm in general a little underweight on the Kansas City offense. Hill is the one guy I don't mind getting exposure to just because of his upside and his big playability. But I do have a little more ownership of the other three tight ends compared to Kelsey on this slate. But we've got Cup at 60%, and we do like Stafford. So, Keith, your thoughts on wide receiver? How much do you need to prioritize Cooper Kupp here?
Yeah, the price tag is difficult, but he's a big priority. I just think that the game script works out to where the Rams, or even if they're leading, the Rams are just going to throw a lot in this game. The Bucs have surrendered. I believe it's the top overall pass rate against them on the season. It lines up from like a football perspective that the Rams are going to be throwing a ton here. Running should be very difficult. And we know that Matt Stafford can just completely lock onto Cooper Kupp. Immense upside in this matchup. Ownership isn't going to bother me on a 2-game slate. I'm trying to get as much Kupp in there as I can.
All right, Tuttle, what about you? Your thoughts on Cooper Kupp and whether you need to prioritize it?
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. I think he is a priority. I will say, though, for as much as we like Kupp, some of these, like Odell will be fairly owned. I think Van Jefferson, like I hate saying this, but I think Van Jefferson's an excellent tournament option from that offense. He'll be the lowest owned receiving option. We know he's going to be on the field. We know he does have, like, he's a downfield threat. So it really only takes one play at his price point. So yeah, Kupp's a priority, but I think getting exposure to the Rams passing attack in general should be a priority. And I don't think that's going to be the case for a lot of people. I think some of these secondary receiving options are going to go almost completely overlooked.
Yeah, I like Beckham and Jefferson as tournament pivots for sure. And I think this is a lot of where the slate's going to be won and lost. I mean, because of the running back position being like your most expensive running back on DraftKings is 5.9K. Your most expensive running back on FanDuel is 7.2K. So the fact that you're not spending top dollar on a Derrick Henry or a running back on today's slate is going to make some builds look a little similar. So whoever you choose is like your wide receiver 3, that's going to be the biggest differentiator for most lineups today. So that could be what, as much as you might hate the fact that you might have a 1v1 of Gabriel Davis versus Van Jefferson versus Byron Pringle. That's the type of situation that's probably going to make or break a lot of lineups today. Gabriel Davis is getting some buzz. He's been playing ahead. Sanders and Beasley have seen their snaps dip a little bit. You've got Tyler Johnson as maybe the de facto wide receiver 2 for Tampa Bay these days, though his numbers haven't exactly been fantastic. You've got Hardman, you've got Pringle, you've got Robinson for the Chiefs. Even Isaiah McKenzie may be getting a little attention as a big play threat. So, Keith, you got maybe one or two of these cheaper receivers that you like in tournaments?
Yeah, this is a really interesting range. My favorite of the 3 is Gabriel Davis. He is coming with the most ownership of the 3, but just expect Buffalo to have a lot of success here, put up a ton of points. And you mentioned just the snap share counts over the last couple of weeks. Gabriel Davis is the wide receiver 2 here from everything we're seeing in snap data, target share. I know Emmanuel Sanders missed a couple of weeks here, but with Sanders back last week, Beasley barely saw the field. And it was Gabriel Davis that was running ahead of Sanders. So I really like Davis in this matchup with Kansas City. Pringle and Jefferson are interesting as well. it's a situation where, I mean, maybe you leave some money on the table to play multiples of these guys, and that's a way to differentiate. Stephon Diggs' price is really cheap on DraftKings, so it's going to be difficult to get away from a Cup Diggs type of build. But if you do that with two of these 4K guys, I think you're going to be really different from the field.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not starting with Cup, you're probably starting with two of Evans, Hill, and Diggs because of the way the salaries work out. So, Cup becomes the first starting point, but then those next three guys are obviously fine as pivots. Or if you can't quite fit Cup, you get two. You get Evans and Diggs or Evans and Hill. You see a lot of lineups look like that as well, particularly the ones where maybe you're using Higbee at tight end. So. We kind of glossed over the range right below Cup a little bit, but Tuttle, do you have a preferred guy out of that Evans, Hill, Diggs trio? They're kind of around the same ownership and around the same price.
I think I go Tyreek, then Diggs, then Evans. His personal rankings there. I mean, I think they're all excellent plays. I think theoretically, like, again, I'm not going to pretend I'm a huge X's and O's guy, but like, who else is who else is the Rams going to focus on stopping defensively other than Gronk and Mike Evans? So it's like, could I see them scheme against? I could see Evans getting taken out of the game plan a lot more quickly than Diggs and Tyreek, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think those other two guys are harder to take out. So I think Evans has the lower floor than those other two guys, in my opinion.
All right, one last question here from John Tom in the chat. We've got about 2 minutes to lock. DK, small field GPPs, do you prefer Fournette or Akers? Keith, I'll throw that one your way.
There's risk with Fournette, just with the injury being soft tissue and Bernard coming back and showing work in the passing game. But I still think it's Fournette for me. Just a really tough matchup for Akers. I do like him to be involved in the passing game today, but I like Fournette to have a little bit better efficiency and a little bit better role than Akers.
Tuttle, you got any concerns about Fournette's role coming back, or you think he's gonna get his usual work?
So I don't think he'll get his usual work, which, looking at our gridiron projections, it seems like we're projecting him for, because he's projecting for nearly 19 DK points. I think Bernard did enough last week where he'll see a lot more third down work. Like, I don't know if people forget, like, and this is, I think, kind of what we're projecting, but Fournette was basically 100% of RB snaps before he got hurt. And
he had like not 6 targets in like 6 straight games too.
Yeah. Like, he'll still get targeted on early downs, but not I fully expect Bernard to have a bigger role than pretty much any pass catching back than we saw this season.
Yeah, that's a not a huge gap between those two guys. And I think Fournette projects a little better, but I don't mind a pivot to Akers and GPPs if he makes a big play or two. There's certainly a ceiling there, and he looked pretty fresh last week. So we shall see. With that, we're at about 30 seconds to lock. So by the time this comes across the airwaves, we'll be right at lock. And best of luck in your contest. So should be 2 more interesting games today. And you got to think the 2 winners today will be favored in the championship games next week, with the both teams knowing that they're going to be hosting either the Bengals for the AFC championship game, and then the 49ers for the NFC championship game. And those 2 teams will, whoever wins today, be the favorites to get to the Super Bowl. So should be some good games, and be sure to come back later tonight if you are a Rotogrinders premium subscriber. We've got Keith and I will be on for the NBA Crunch Time show tonight. So that'll be at 5:20 Eastern time. And also, don't forget our sponsor of this show, BetMGM. Sports betting is live in New York now, and BetMGM is live in New York as well. So you can use promo code GrindersBet, and you get bet $10. You win $200 if the team that you bet on scores a touchdown. You can also use promo code Grinders when you sign up to get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. So plenty of good promos going on in New York with the launch of sports betting. And you can find all of the information with promo codes and sign-up bonuses on our Rotogrinders sports betting page. So check that out at rotogrinders.com. And also encourage you to try out Rotogrinders Premium. If you want to check out that NBA show that Keith and I will be on later tonight, we can get you a single sport package or a combo package that includes pretty much everything except NASCAR. You can basically customize your premium package to suit whatever you like. So check us out, rotogrinders.com. Also got the free Discord as well, where we take the questions here live during the show. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off so we can all enjoy the football. Thanks to Tuttle and Keith for joining me this afternoon. Thanks to Eli as well for producing behind the scenes. I am Justin. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everybody, and we will catch you later.